Hey everyone! Ooh, my light just went out. Hey everyone, this is Amani from Hedgecraft Heirlooms, and that light will come back on in a second. It's because I am rebooting my tablet. Usually I do this live simultaneously on Instagram and Facebook, and the last weeks before this one, I was having some issues with getting my tablet to work alright. Hey Killian, glad you're here. Hey Inori Bunny. We're going to be doing a live stream today about weather magic. I was just saying that I know it's a little dark here right now. My light is going to come on in a second here. I might have to push the button again. I'm having technological difficulties. Ooh, there we are. Technological difficulties on my tablet as far as trying to get this hooked up on Facebook at the same time, but I didn't want to wait any longer than I already had. So I'm going to give this one more try really quickly, if you could hang in there with me. You know what, I'll try to talk and do my little pre-show at the same time. So in my pre-show today, I said I was going to be talking about working with Thor, who is a deity that people frequently work with when they're doing weather magic, which is why I thought it would make sense to talk about him today. Now I want to preface this with saying that hey Spinning Witch, we're here talking about weather magic today. That I do not personally work with Thor overly much. I've only had a couple of passing interactions with him. So this is not necessarily information based on any personal gnosis, but just things that I know, things that I've read. And I am not exactly a Norse pagan, although I have a significant respect for the Norse pantheon, and I do occasionally work with Odin, actually. So, that said, let's talk a little bit about Thor while I see if I can't get this thing set up. So, Thor, I don't know if any of you guys have seen the Marvel movies. I know I have. Let me know if you were a big fan of those in the comments below. And as always, of course, I didn't say yet. If you want to throw a hashtag live into the comments, that would be great. Ooh, the camera's working this time, so that's a good sign. So, if you watch the Marvel movies, there are actually a lot of details about Thor that they include in those movies that is actually kind of accurate. For example, Thor is indeed considered to be the guardian of Midgard. Midgard, so really, 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 really quick. Spinning Witch says Odin and Freya. Awesome. Again, kind of sort of me too. Hey here, Cottage Cloth Thrift. We're here talking about weather magic today. We're doing a little pre-show talking about working with Thor. So a really, really, really down dirty Norse cosmology lesson, because I have studied it a little bit, even though I don't actively practice it a whole lot. There's believed to be 9 worlds that are more or less branches on a world tree called Yggdrasil. And I don't know if they mentioned Yggdrasil in the movies. They might have. I can't remember anymore. If you remember, let me know. So Midgard is the branch, so to speak, of... Hey, Thriftical Magic, we're here talking about weather magic today. Midgard is the branch of the 9 worlds, or one of the 9 worlds, that represents Earth, where we are, where we live, where we exist right now. And Thor is particularly considered to be the guardian of this place. Hey, Psychic Recovery Rich, we're here talking about weather magic today. Thor is also a god of thunder and lightning. Interestingly, the name Thor translates to thunder, and Mjolnir, which is the name of Thor's hammer, translates to lightning. Hey, Aubrey. Wow, my brain, I'm doing too many things at the same time. Forgive me. I'm trying to get Facebook hooked up here at the same time while I'm babbling here, so I'm attempting to multitask, but particularly not all that well. So let's see. I'm almost there. I had to do a whole restart on my tablet here, and I'm in the midst of getting it set back up again for the live. So, Thor, it says here, I have a quick quote that I kind of copied into my little outline here. Sorry, my allergies are killing me today, so my nose is like crazy itchy. It says here that he was appealed to by those in need of protection, comfort, and the blessings and hallowing of places, things, and events. Numerous surviving runic inscriptions invoke him to hallow the words, and their intended purpose, and it was he who was called upon to hallow weddings, which is kind of interesting because I think that's particularly interesting because I happen to know that there are other deities within the Norse pantheon that are more closely associated with domesticity and marriage, especially Frigg. But Thor would be the male side of that and maybe I would say also Odin, because I feel like Odin, All-Father, kind of covers everything. But that's just my personal opinion. And of course, Thor is also a warrior god. He has a lot of stories and mythology that center around, him, fighting in wars and battles and winning them. And then, Thor is often, in modern times, because a lot of people, talk about the idea that, Norse mythology and faith has a lot to do with, the Valhalla and honor and all of those sorts of things. How does that reflect on the modern day? A lot of people tend to associate the experience of the warrior with mental illness. So a lot of people will invoke Thor in the modern day for mental illness and issues and, fighting it in that way. Also for bringing rain, we mentioned that, blessing marriages and protection. In fact, a lot of people will actually use the symbol of Mjolnir like this, tracing it in the four quarters, or to cast or bless or consecrate a space or a circle. So that's another way that you can work with Thor outside of weather magic specifically. All right, so that was my pre-show. Really quickly, I'm going to attempt to go live on Facebook, and then I will jump into the weather magic stuff that we actually all came here for. Let's see. Wrapping up, I have to make sure I did this right. Shared page groups, go live. All right, fingers crossed. I think we're just about there. I'm going to tilt this up a little bit. All right, hey there on Facebook, you're just joining us. Hey, it's Auntie Kristen, we're here talking about weather magic, and same thing on Facebook. Sorry, you're catching me a little late. Usually, I do a pre-show. Unfortunately, I did my pre-show while I was getting you guys set up because my tablet was being extra special. I had to do a restart, but I didn't want to start late for everybody. And I tend to get more folks on Instagram anyway. But if you're here, of course, if you want to throw a hashtag live into the comments, hashtag replay if you're watching on the replay, just because it helps the algorithm reach out and find other people that might want to watch. That said, let's talk about weather magic. So, weather magic is actually a type of sea magic. I don't know if any of you out there are familiar with Anwen Avalon on Instagram, but she's a big, sea magic, water magic person. So weather magic is sort of a subset of ocean magic or sea magic. Basically because most weather, as we think about it, is really a type of precipitation. With rain, hail, snow, etc., etc. And of course, if you know anything about the water cycle, the water is regularly, as it rains, it goes into the groundwater, ultimately it filters into the ocean where it is again evaporated and the whole thing starts all over again. So that's how we kind of can tie it into the sea or the ocean. So there are some traditional tools that are typically used for weather magic, and they include things like rope or cord, which are actually one of the main tools that I've been able to find information about in regards to my own personal ancestry, which is Finnish/Sami. I'm not actually 100% sure how to pronounce that, honestly. I've only ever read it. And they would commonly hire, and I'm certain that I'm mentioning this later, so I'm probably double upping. I'll talk about it more later. But rope is often used to basically capture or release wind. And traditionally, it's tied 3 times, in a row on a length of rope. Once for a light breeze, twice for a stiff wind, and thrice for a tempest. So obviously, the idea was you didn't really want to use the third knot unless you really, really needed it. Hey Shaz, it's Shazam. We're here talking about weather magic today. Just a real quick kind of disclaimer, because I realized I didn't actually say it out loud yet. I mentioned it in some of my emails, but I didn't put it in this particular live stream. Weather magic is something that should generally not be trifled with. There's a whole butterfly effect that you have to really think about when it comes to trying to alter weather patterns. That's kind of some serious business. So I just want to, spinning and weather magic are friends. That makes a lot of sense. I absolutely would agree with that. I want to clarify that a lot of the information I'm giving you is intended to be primarily academic and not so much practical. Your mileage may vary. If you choose to take this information and move ahead and try to learn more and play with it, I absolve myself of all responsibility because I am not an expert. But I do want to share this with you guys today because I just felt like it would be a really cool topic and I wanted to learn more about it myself, honestly. As far as my ancestry. It's Auntie Kristen says, this talk of ropes and knots reminds me of sailing and sails. Absolutely, and I will talk about that a little bit more in a little bit because they absolutely relate. So anyway, getting back to ropes, I talked about the 3 knots. It's considered that the best way to kind of capture the energy of a storm to create wind was to do so within an existing weather event. So basically to stand in a windstorm and tie the knots at the same time. So the idea is that you're capturing the energy in the midst of it already happening. And there is evidence as early as the 12th century of ropes like that actually being sold by weather witches, which is really neat. It was kind of a big deal. And some other tools that were commonly used was a knife or athame. I just said athame. Jeez. Athame for directing or cutting energy. And of course a drum or a rain stick / a rattle. There's a lot of sympathetic magic that goes into weather magic, so, if it sounds like or, feels like or looks like rain or thunder or what have you, it can help to create it in reality. So I kind of brought it over here because there's a small part of me that wanted to show it off because I thought it was too apropos. So drums being used for thunder. I actually call this drum Thunderbringer. I painted this myself. And then, of course, other things that could be used. I mentioned rattles, or, of course, rain sticks, which I have one of those, too. I'm going to play it because it sounds really pretty. I'm just trying to make sure my drum isn't going to fall over. It doesn't want to stay in that spot. There we go. So then we have rain sticks. Notice this has a little crack in it. There's little bits falling out. That's terrible. Well, anyway, you get the idea. So anything like that, sympathetic magic doesn't just work for all spells. It will just work for, like love magic. It works for all magic. The idea that like creates like, if you haven't heard that terminology before. Another thing that was frequently used other than tools like drums and rattles, also a common thing was called wind whistling, which is really neat. So, if you were to, and a lot of people have done this just for fun, to kind of replicate the sound of the wind blowing with your own breath, etc., etc. I've never really practiced it for the purpose of wind whistling, but a lot of people will find that if they practice that, they can generally use it to help create and harness and control, to a certain degree, the wind. However, and it is an indigenous practice in some cultures, especially in the Filipino indigenous culture, as I was able to discover. However, a lot of people say that it is hard to control and it's hard to learn. So, as I kind of mentioned earlier, tread carefully, your mileage may vary. But weather magic, interestingly, has been found in pretty much every mythology and folklore system throughout history, which is really interesting. So it's very universal. And some of the first known writings about weather magic was in ancient Greece, or ancient Greek, the language, probably is how I meant that. One by Herodotus in the history of the Persian Wars. Hey, Wild Green Child, we're here talking about weather magic today. Thanks for joining. Also, it was talked about by Empedocles, which I think is a fantastic name, who talks about harnessing the elements of a storm in a particular writing. And I think it kind of is of note and interesting that Empedocles is the father, so to speak, of our kind of occult system of using the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. So Empedocles is the person that kind of invented that system, and we're still continuing to use it today. Other places where it's found is in Shakespeare, interestingly, so that's in England or the Saxons. And obviously it didn't originate with Shakespeare. I'm assuming, it probably was being practiced by indigenous people long before that for him to have the inspiration to write about it. But there is some quotes from Macbeth in particular that say, I give thee a wind, thou art kind, and I another. I myself have all the other, and the very ports they blow, and the quarters that they know, I, the shipman's card. So that was totally a thing there too. And I mentioned the Finns / Sami people were also known to be witches and sorcerers that were particularly adept at controlling the wind. Now, I mentioned earlier I have not practiced it, probably in part out of fear, because I'm like, oh crap, what if I am really good at it? Because that would be a terrible power to hold on to. But so frequently people called, and I can't remember who it was earlier, it's gone to Kristen. Kristen was saying earlier about sailing. So frequently wind sellers were hired by sailors and boatmen to ensure safe journeys. So it was a really big thing. Alternatively, there were some people that absolutely did not want a Finn or a wind seller on board because they were afraid that they would curse the voyage. So you're getting a little bit of both sides there. And the oldest known Finnic writing actually was on birch bark and was about lightning strikes. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but the English translation I was able to find says, God's arrow, 10 is your name. This arrow is God's own, the doom God leads. And a lot of people believe that that has to do with lightning strikes. And I actually saw a picture of it online. It's pretty cool. Interestingly, the main male figure in Finnish mythology is named Ukko, and he's a sky god, often associated with lightning strikes, fertility, and growth, and he carries an axe. And I don't know if any of those things sound familiar to you, but he is often conflated and mixed up with Thor because they are, on the surface, very similar, but the mythology, of course, is very different. And the cosmology from the Finnish mythology to the Norse Germanic mythology is actually pretty different, but on the outside, they're similar, kind of. And then even Christians actually had their own invocations for weather magic, which is mind-boggling to me. Specifically in the Malleus Maleficarum, which, if you're not familiar, and many of you probably are, is the witch's hammer, which is the document that was fabricated and written, in the early parts of the witch hunts, in order to condemn witches. It basically said these are what a witch is. This is how you can recognize a witch and know what to do about it. So in the Malleus Maleficarum, there was an invocation for halting a storm. I don't know if the idea was to ironically stop magic. I'm not sure, but this is how it goes, and I think it's really neat. So if you're someone who works within a Catholic or Christian framework, you might really like to play around with this, but this is how it goes. It says, I adjure you, hailstorms and wind by the 5 wounds of Christ, erred by the 3 nails which pierced his hands and feet, and by the 4 holy evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that you be dissolved and fall as rain. So that's pretty cool. And also, in the midst of this kind of spell, in the Malleus Maleficarum, although don't tell them that's what it's called, 3 hailstones would in turn, one after the other, be thrown into a fire while reciting the Lord's Prayer and the angelic salutation, which maybe you guys know what that is. I'm not familiar with that one. To achieve the same result. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a separate spell with the hailstones in the fire. And they finished by reciting the Gospel of St. John and saying, by the words of this Gospel, may this tempest be stopped. So all of that to say that weather magic is incredibly universal and very common if you look through history, and it's a very, very interesting topic. So that said, that is all I have for you today about weather magic. I thought it was really cool information. I hope that you guys enjoyed it too. Really quick, I'm going to do a little sign off because I am ultimately going to be uploading this to my YouTube channel. But hang around because after that I'm going to be doing a little mini live sale. Then those prices are only going to be available to you folks here that are watching, so don't tune out just yet. But if you're here watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining. Next week we will be talking about protection magic, which is literally like the most requested topic that I get from people, so I'm really excited to get to deliver it to you. Don't be, square, show up and check it out because it's going to be a good time. Kristen, says thank you so much for knowing how to pronounce your name. Well, it says Kristen. I'm not sure how other people are pronouncing it, but you're welcome. Anyway, take care. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and blessed be.